good morning. Today I'm joined by my guests in no particular order. Gary Barker, who is a PropTech innovator and strategic leader from our sector. Rick Dawson, he's the CEO of Alto Software Group. Paul Halliwell, the executive director of View My Chain. And of course, Katy Billany, who you'll all know, executive director from 20EA. Good morning, everybody.
Morning, David.
Good morning.
Nice to have
Morning.
Morning, David.
Nice to have you all with us. Today's topic is one that's sort of close to my heart as somebody who still puts on his agent's hat a fair few times a week. I think it's fair to say, in terms of technology, a lot has happened in the last 5 to 10 years, particularly in the property sector. And certainly we were bound with loads and loads of different products and solutions and tech products that are being actively marketed to agents as the next big thing. And I think it in general, there is a theme that they are becoming slightly more useful, although that wasn't always the case. There was a lot of solutions hunting around for a problem at some point, which made agents a little bit more cynical and skeptical about them. So I suppose let's just open up with that premise, if you like, and explore that a little bit. We'll start with Gary on this. Gary, what's your view of how we've kind of moved on, and if we've really
Well, I
moved
think if
on?
you go back a few years ago, no, look, I think we have moved on. I think there's been a lot of change in the industry around prop tech and an approach to it. I think I agree with what you say there. I mean, we did research a few years ago that said that real estate agents on average were using 12 to 15 different systems. And when you look at the functionality of those systems, often they were solving problems that didn't really exist. But, as agents, they were always looking at what's new and what's out there. So I think, there's always been a challenge around technology and how it's utilized. But I think there's been a change because I think a lot of the core systems have started opening up now and making technology much more accessible as well, and allowing agents to operate slightly differently. So I think, look, I think we are definitely seeing some changes, but I think we're also seeing a bit of a drawback as well in terms of the number of platforms that agents are using. They've tried a lot, they know what works, and they're kind of using that going forward. And I think we'll see a lot more of that over the next few years as well.
So there's no kind of overall reluctance for agents to adopt tech. If it works, they'll integrate it into their systems and processes.
Yeah, I
The
can jump
wheels.
in here. Um, uh, Sorry, Gary, go ahead.
I was just going to say that it's not, it's not so much the reluctance. You've got to prove it. You've got to prove it works. So if you're a supplier to the industry, you've got to prove that it works. If you can't show demonstrable benefits to the agents, then they're not going to use it.
Ricardo, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I was just to build on Gary's point, really. We constantly poll the industry around the sort of peripheral systems that plug into the CRMs. And there has been a little bit of consolidation over the last few years that we've probably all seen. We think it's now somewhere between 7 and 12 systems typically. But to Gary's point, there seemed to be a few years ago just an explosion of prop tech of people trying to solve every possible problem, even problems that the agents didn't know they had. Um, there's a huge trend around AI and automation at the moment, which, as far as I'm concerned, rightly so. And you're starting to see a much deeper focus from agents around doing the basics incredibly well. And actually, what you're starting to see is a little bit of a trend in the winners and losers in agents, a changing dynamic where it used to be whoever had the most listings wins the most new valuations, for example.
Yeah.
And you're starting to see now some of the upstarts that are really embracing automation, AI, and that are really focusing on converting faster and operational efficiencies are starting to grow at a faster pace. And so, when we talk about automation and AI, ultimately this is about tools that reduce friction and speed up time to money. And the sort of buzzword days of 1,000 different prop techs seems to be reducing, and there seems to be much more better understanding from agents in terms of, does this really solve a problem for me? And it's centered around automating things that an agent just really needs to do and do really well.
Yeah, the basics.
I think that's absolutely right. People have got to be really clear about what they're hiring that piece of software to do. And there were lots of things that, frankly, didn't really need to get done. And then if you need to log into 5 different systems in order to get that one job done, that's going to kill any momentum in your workflow. So it's not just about having the tools to do the job that you need doing, but it's also about making sure those tools can talk to each other and that there's an integration and that there is a common data layer. We're not just dealing with a bunch of disconnected logins.
And so that's really where the friction can come up, can't it? In terms of the systems talking to themselves. And I know, Ricardo mentioned it before, they've done lots of research, but the reason for that is that they'd like their users to log in, be able to access as much of that in one spot where they're actually sort of doing their work. And you mentioned AI before, and there's a sense that we're only just scraping the surface of what it's capable of doing, and that we will get to that to much deeper uses of AI and real application in years to come. Equally as important to the industry as buzzwords like AI, data. Katy, I'm coming to you on this. Data is also something that we're learning to harness properly, and obviously there's a place for AI to help us to do that as well. But it's fair to say, I started out as an agent with a hot box, and I think Rightmove had only just been imagined 30 years ago or so. Our access to data was whatever I could remember from the last year of trading. There wasn't much written down. There wasn't access to the land registry figures in the same way that we have today. That's changed the way that we do our jobs, hasn't it, Katy?
It has, absolutely. And I think that the use of data is key in kind of facing what I think is one of the biggest challenges in the sector at the moment, and that's raising fees. I think that we've spent so many years with agents undercutting each other, and we've got to such a low baseline that we're finding that using data and our tech tools to actually position yourself as a expert in the sector and to demonstrate your own performance can effectively help to justify your worth, essentially. And I think that one of the challenges we face, though, is that agents think that they need to use data because people like you and I are telling them that they need to. So they get all excited about it, and then they go, oh, well, yeah, but I don't know how. So having the right tools in place to enable them to easily access the type of data that is going to be valuable to them is really important.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think there's a bit of a trick in presentation there as well, because you have to know what the members of the public are interested in and how to present it to them. So there are some absolute data geeks out there, and we love the stats and we can churn out the numbers. But the average homeowner who is worried about, their next move, may be motivated by completely other things, and so therefore getting bogged down in the nitty-gritty isn't what they want. But if you can present it in the right way, it really does help to cement your place in their minds as an expert, but also that the advice that you're giving them isn't just plucked out of the air, that you have actually done some homework before you enter the living room, which I think is always worth doing. When we're looking at the sort of types of technology that we've touched on AI and we've touched on data, but what are the sort of things that are, in your opinions, Bit of a controversial question, but what are the types of technology that are underperforming or perhaps a little bit disappointing and causing a bit too much friction in an agency workflow?
Yeah, it's a good question, though. I mean, to touch on the sort of previous points, we see that the trends generally, and again, this does lean towards AI and automation, and I'll come on to the question, but we look at, to Katie's point, how do you take data that's in the system and that's, industry data to look at performance trends and how you benchmark yourself as an agent and how you can improve your performance. And then it's about orchestration of tasks. And on that second point, I think orchestration of tasks in the lettings progression and the accounting journeys, they remain too manual. I think we probably all agree.
Yeah.
And so they're sort of primed for these sorts of trends to take hold of those sorts of workflows. So I'd say there's an area of opportunity there. And then again, playing into the data and automation space, actually marketing to existing clients, particularly at the SME end of the market, is an underused superpower. Over years and years, these agents develop tens of thousands of contacts in these databases. Do they really extract the data, extract the trends? When are they most likely to move? Looking at propensity and marketing to them accordingly. I think, it's our job to provide them tools to do that better. So, there's a laundry list of things we could do better, but those two pop out to me.
I would say that my focus is very much after the SSTC. And I think where tech's falling short is its inability really to talk to itself. A lot of systems, when they're exchanging data, can't even agree which property that they're talking about. And if you can't agree which property you're talking about, much less which property you are chained with, it kills automation. It's very, very hard to automate something that's a fundamental misunderstanding about what actual property you're dealing with. So you're not going to get interoperability until we've got data that can be transferred between systems in a much cleaner way. It's very different from the challenge which you face top of the funnel.
Yeah, it's an interesting, Paul, because obviously your raison d'etre is to try and make our transactions run more smoothly and in a more interconnected way, and to really sort of help the pipelines that agents are sat on. I think one of the two constants of agency, if you were to sort of quiz agents as to what they want tech to help them do, they will always say we'd like more instructions, because that is something that is top of the funnel stuff. It's always front of mind and they always want that. But secondly, I think where business owners probably get a bit more frustrated is that it's all well and good having a really healthy funnel at the top. We seem to find issues in the middle. If you look at the sort of headlines that are reported time and time again, transaction times are slipping beyond what is reasonable in most cases, and fall through rates tend to sort of go through the roof as well. When you've got that combination of very long transaction times and also a high frequency of fall throughs, what that means for us as business owners is that cash flow is awful. It means that adopting tech and investing in solutions actually also becomes a victim of this, because we have to decide how to whether we're stockpiling our money, whether we're holding it back, whether we're going to reinvest it in the business. The truth is, if we can free up that part of the sales process, so as you said, Paul, post SSTC, if you like, there's an awful lot of work that still needs to go into that sector and that part of our journey. Do you have any particular success cases to talk of there? Because I know we're talking about where tech perhaps lets us down, but where does it lift us up?
Definitely. I mean, this for me has been a massive part of probably a year's worth of work, David. I mean, I mean, if you could take some simple examples, yeah. So, and I don't mean to slight any of the conveyancers or anything else. It's a process, but we've done a lot of analysis over the last kind of year or so that shows that it takes 5 days to onboard a customer. When that customer, so you've just had an offer accepted, 5 days to it then takes a bit of time to get the solicitor on, 5 days to then get the actual then they order, once the funds are on account, they'll order the actual searches. The searches then might take 2 weeks to come back. Nothing's happened. From that time, nothing has actually happened. So you've added 3 weeks delay to a process, whether you like it or not. I mean, and that's the bit that that's not a technology solution. That's just an interoperability. That's people connecting it together and actually doing things in a smart way. And I think one of the reasons why, I think there's a lot of platforms out there, and Ricardo can talk, no doubt, to what they're doing exceptionally well with kind of their platform, but to shorten those timescales, not just increases the assurances of the transaction, but it actually reduces fall throughs and increases, the actual cash into the business and far faster. I mean, I remember in agency back in, well, showing my age now, but we used to be able to turn the pipeline 4 times a year. I mean, that's unreal, isn't it?
But I think it's also about putting the right properties in at the top of the funnel. So, David, you mentioned, every agent would always say that their number one aim is more listings, but agents shouldn't be just taking on blindly every single property that wants to instruct with them. It's about understanding what is actually selling in your marketplace and where your niche fits within that. The supply demand ratio for detached houses nationally is up 8% and down, I think, 1.5% for flats. So, if you read that headline stat, you might go, oh, right, I need to rush out and get loads of detached houses. But actually, if that's not what's selling in your area, then you're following the data in the wrong way. So it's about understanding both national and local trends, but also how likely is that property that you're listing actually going to go on to sell, because otherwise you're never going to get paid. You're going to have spent a fortune marketing it and doing viewings on it, but nothing's going to come of it. So it's about actually using data and tech that's available to kind of inform yourself at the beginning of that process.
And I suppose ultimately that allows you as the agent to really sort of deliver real customer service to the client, because you can have that informed conversation that, look, I'd love to help you with this house. In an ideal world, there's a market for it at this level. However, at the moment, I can tell you from facts on the ground, we're going to have a tough time with it. So if you're in for the long run, then great, let's invest in it and try and throw some resource at it. Otherwise, sometimes you have to advise people to sit it out and wait for a better time or a better opportunity. And that could be the best advice that you give a client. But it's interesting what Gary was saying there, because really how we start our transactions and how we start really even onboarding clients dictates how our transaction times and speed, in terms of getting sale ready, I guess it's what we were saying. We can move people forward more quickly. Ricardo, from your point of view, you're using systems and improving systems to allow agents to adapt their workflows properly to get on top of that. Is it an education piece? Is it a shift in mindset? Or do we need the tech to force us into good habits effectively?
I think it's a bit of both, Dave. The good thing here, there's a lot of smart people in the industry focused on this as a problem. We did and to Paul and Katy have made this, and Gary have made this point. We survey our base of 30,000 users quite frequently, and I pulled some information this morning on some of the latest feedback, but 46% of agents flagged their biggest pain point as being the sales progression process that's causing an incredible amount of friction. Now, the good part of this is, we will play our part. VMC are playing have got an amazing theory of victory around this and are demonstrating some really good use cases. You've got businesses like Veya and Coadjute and we've done some stuff with movement. I think there is, from our perspective, the theory of victory is how can you generate as much information as possible up front, but not via heavy lift onto the agent through automation. A lot of this information is publicly available. How can you pull it together in seconds rather than, to Gary's point, 5 days worth of onboarding manual information so that the conveyancer can pick up a pen? No one's going to do that. And there's some interesting development over the last few days around material information and what that means. But then off the back of that, there's an interesting opportunity, and the knock-on effect for conveyancers are to be debated, but around AI generation of the risk assessment. How quickly can you actually just push these transactions through and insure against the downside and do a bunch of smart things. And then ultimately, once you've got that data package pulled together, it's about data transfer and communication. And then your biggest hurdle is going to be managing the chain, because none of that stuff fixes that. And these guys are doing some smart stuff there. So I think absolutely a pain point, some complexity in the solution, but some smart brains to fix it. And, I would bank that 2 years' time from now, we're going to be slicing off massive chunks from that fall through rate and that time to exchange through a bunch of these systems as we pull them back together. Because again, I don't think this gets solved by one single supplier. I think it gets solved by the interoperability of quite a few. But let's see.
I think there are sales tools everywhere. Those are all very good. There are lots of tools out there being used, but they're not being used with discipline, I would say, in a lot of places. So I think we just talked about, do you need to reshape your business? Clearly, not every agency is the same. But equally, to buy a tool to help you solve your sales progression, the sort of tool that Rick's business has, and then not use it properly, it's like buying a gym membership, not going and then wondering why you've not got any fitter. I mean, you do have to use these things. It's a compromise.
Yeah.
But you do have to lean in and use the tools that are built to solve the problem that you are trying to solve. If you bring a tool into your business and then everybody carries on working in exactly the same way that they used to, you're not going to get any benefits. It comes back again to that range of products. Buy a smaller number of products, but when you do buy them, use them properly and make sure that you are getting the return. Ultimately, sell more houses, more certainty, fewer fall throughs.
I mean, David, I suppose to put it out there for, back in your agency days, yeah, vendors are motivated at certain stages, yeah. So nowadays, a vendor is motivated when they want to get their property onto the portals. We won't debate portals, but they want to get their property online and they want to get exposure.
They're excited. They're looking forward, aren't they?
100%. They will do anything at that point to get their property online, yeah. Once they've had offers on the property, their attention turns to the next property that they want to buy, and all of a sudden the paperwork and all the things they need to do around their sale, it goes on the back burner a little bit. And this is why I think some of the things we've seen recently, where all of that information has been captured up front at the point that the vendor is really keen because he wants to instruct. He's done his ID check, he's done his AML, he's done his search up front, he's done the material information, he's done all of that, and he's basically, I mean, to use a phrase, he's basically created himself contract ready. And I mean, Ricardo, I'd love to hear from you how you're finding that at the moment. But if you get that vendor at the top of the funnel before their property's listed, I would love to. I mean, we've seen a little bit from LMS's recent pieces, but I know there's other companies doing this. I honestly believe that they get the motivation at the right point, at the right process. You're in a good starting point.
Yeah. I mean, there is still a naivety in the eye of the consumer around the amount of heavy lift that's required up front, and so. Yes, there's an excitement about, I'm getting on the market, but there is still we need to support agents to educate the consumers better about why providing this information up front is important, because there's a huge proportion of vendors that come to market even tentatively. They want to test demand, they want to see what price they can get, they'll go slightly higher, that are not fully committed to the sale unless it ticks a whole bunch of boxes for them. And agents, back to Katie's point, are prepared to accept that because they know if they get more listings, it drives the flywheel. They get more advertising boards up, they get more vendors on into the funnel. So there's a sort of symbiotic relationship between non incentivized consumers and agents that you sort of have to decouple in a way. But the giving them the right tools to then onboard them sort of gives them the ability to then qualify how high their desire is to market their property, I suppose. But what we get, because we've built B2B2C tools to pull all of this information together. And the view in the eye of the consumer in many cases is, I thought the estate agent is supposed to do this for me. And it is quite a lot, all the things that you just mentioned, Gary. But if we can automate it, if the onboarding of your vendor journey is like setting up a bank with Monzo, that's how we win. It's not giving them endless forms, TA6, TA8, TA10s, whatever, and having to manually do all this stuff because it's painful for both sides.
But I think that sort of I think the compliance angle that you inadvertently touch on there, because I think and I appreciate we're filming this in the middle of a storm around material information and what the future might look like for agents in terms of what information they have to capture up front. But I think given the fact that that's clearly going to be a feature of our work going forward, that we're providing much better information to the consumer and the ultimate beneficiaries of all the work that we do, and that will be the person either renting a property or buying a property. They have a right to see certain information up front. But that burden of compliance that agents sometimes mistakenly think they're carrying on their own can be shared with the vendors, and effectively, if you are able to introduce that into your processes as a service, so you're automating it, you're delivering a lot of that information up front, and it then is not seen as a burden, but rather an investment in your journey as somebody who's selling a home, who's moving, and you can get them to effectively, I think, commit a lot earlier to the whole transaction. Because what you've said in terms of people testing the market was always our experience as agents, that really until somebody had submitted an offer on a property and then instructed a surveyor or a solicitor, we knew that was kind of the time where, as agents, we could start to breathe out a little bit, because we knew that they were committing money to the transaction, even a small amount, but we knew that they were having to be personally invested in the process, rather than just the agent carrying all the risk and all the cost up until that point. So I think with all the kind of stipulations that we need to kind of get out of the way up front, if we do handle that and package it as a service that is frictionless and pain-free, it can also have a dual purpose, and that is tying those people who are, I suppose you might have called them tire kickers in the old days, but we call them wall tappers in our profession. But basically, people who were testing the market with no risk to themselves now have to get invested up front, and I think that's absolutely a really valid point. When it comes to the agents, though, is it a mindset shift that they need? Is it education that they want? How do we change it?
I think we have to be quite careful as suppliers to the industry to not lean into arrogance around, I mean, it's obvious if you get all the information up front and you do all this work, and we made a point about the depth of usage. But what we've got to be careful of is just saying, because we've been pushing this, by the way, onto agents for years and years and years, this as a narrative. We've just got to be a bit delicate around, guys, it's obvious. Go and use and pull all of this information up front and then use the tools that we actually supply to you. It's our job as suppliers to make that process incredibly easy, frictionless, and explain to the agent, why should I? What's the ROI of doing this? So I don't want us to have the same argument over and over again around the logic of doing this and why it'll add benefit to you, because it's there for all to see. It's our job as suppliers to make that really easy, frictionless, and explain the ROI in a really complete way. So I get all the points, but I still come back to, it comes back to the tech suppliers to solve this in collaboration with our agents that are ultimately going to use it, because we've got to accept the fact that these guys are doing 1,000 other things. We are absolutely focused on this thing, but these guys are running businesses, some of which are doing better than others. This quite frankly is not in the top 10 most important things in their day, and we have to accept that, and we have to understand what their priorities are and then solve them in a way and explain them in a way that is bite-sized and that they understand and that they can pass on to their consumers. That's my philosophy as a technology provider to the industry anyway.
So I absolutely agree. It's not suppliers' position to be dictating. And I think as by considerable margin, I have the least direct property experience of anybody on this panel. My heritage is technology businesses, but not specifically property. I think it's very interesting, this idea, though, if you zoom all the way out to how the market's going to function in the future. I think that this market will outview. So best practice, it's in your interest. You do this, you will beat your competitors, you attract more business, and then we get more and more of the transactions on the happy path. And from my point of view, from a parochial point of view, more people seeing the chain, etc., etc. But I think there is a different view, which may well still out, which is best practice is, and we have seen this in other markets. Best practice is really absorbed by the centre, the government. And I think what we're seeing here is more a consolidation of best practice rather than actually a withdrawal of the material information. And there will be an element of mandation. Like, this is the way it's going to work, guys. Yeah. Now, it's not our place to be doing that. There are many, learned bodies who will be involved in that. But I think we will get to a point. It's not going to be the market solution that outs. It will be mandation. This is the way things are going to be done in future.
I think that we'll need an aspect of that, because at the moment it's a fear thing for agents. They don't want to be the one that is going into the appraisal and saying, oh, well, if you list with me, you're going to have to pay these fees up now, because they think they're going to lose the instruction. So I think that it's probable that between agents, suppliers, the industry, we probably can't do that entire education piece for vendors without some kind of central mandation, unfortunately.
Well, I think that's happened, hasn't it? I mean, if you'd have said to agents 5 years ago that they wouldn't be signing passports and driving licenses and utility bills, they'd have gone, I know, you're mental. Whereas now we've got IDSP standards. And I mean, how many of you do an ID check? I sit there on my mobile phone, I take a selfie, point at my nose, my ear, whatever. And there you go, it's digitally standard, and I can share that with anybody I want. And credit to the likes of Third 40, OT, Credus, Verify, they're all doing a great job with this. But that's changed. But it took a hell of a lot to change the perception from agents. Agents had to, they had to be demonstrated that it was compliant. They had to be demonstrated that it was easy to use. It had to be fully integrated into their systems. And it had to work for them. But that takes time. And I think that's what's going to happen with a lot of things in this industry. And as tech suppliers, we need to challenge ourselves to give the very best solutions. It helps a consumer. It makes it easier. It is well thought out. It's fully integrated. It's not difficult to use, because, Ricardo and I especially have probably seen this. I mean, you might give the best solution, but if it's not integrated in the right way, people will go back to pen and paper because it's easier for them. I mean, and experience has told me that you've got to do the best solutions and make it fully integrated, and help the agent, help their consumers. We will see change. It is coming.
I'm going to be slightly bold and sort of speak for agents here because I know that you perhaps can't or shouldn't, but I think that what Paul said a couple of discussion points ago really sort of resonated with me, and you might have seen me smiling. The reason I was smiling is that we have so many discussions with agents about their tech stack, and very often we will run through a almost like a laundry list of different apps and different solutions that they're using. And I will say to very often the business owner, well, are your guys using this? Do they like it? Does it add value? Is it making their life easier? And the answer that I will get is, no, they tell me that they hardly log into, and we can, in some cases, actually get the stats from the suppliers themselves as to how often the agent logs in or uses a solution or how thoroughly they use it. Ricardo, you must know this from CRM. Gary, born in the fires of CRM, so he'll know that one of the struggles that we have is everybody uses the diary function and the simple bits. There are more things in that CRM. There's a lot of functionality there. And if you were to map exactly the usage of a system, there seems to be massive blind spots. Now, I actually think that that cannot be put only on the suppliers. I think suppliers are doing a great job of making software prettier than ever before. So in terms of just how it visually appeals to users, it is now easier to use. It's more intuitive. We know where to find things. And it sort of mirrors our tech experience across our lives in terms of the mobile phones that we use, the smartphones, and all the apps that we're using there. So we know what we're doing with it. But I think there is definitely something to say for agents, it almost like a training piece, and how you monitor, manage staff with adoption of tech, because decision makers say, that's a great idea, we're going to put it in here. And teams that are left to kind of run on their own go, nah, I don't like that. That looks like I'm going to have to adapt this, that, and the other. People don't like change. It's change management more than anything else. And I do feel, speaking for agents, we definitely can do better. It's something we struggle with for sure.
I'm going to give a good example. Sorry, Paul. Can I give a good example about this? And it'll probably get me shot and probably get me in trouble. And I'm definitely not going to name the agent. But going back a number of years, we just onboarded one of the biggest agents in the UK. And every month we would have regular meetings with the guys. And every month we got a list of development items. Yeah. And every single month, it was just a case of more development, more development. We want this, we want this, we want this, we want this, we want this. And we made a decision at some point. I sat down with the team and said, this is ridiculous. They're not using half of what they've already got in the system. We've got to do something different. And back then we produced this thing called the value report. It basically, to your point, David, it heat mapped everything they were using in the system and demonstrated to them, well, you've got applicants that have got a house to sell in another area. You haven't contacted them. You've got buyers without email addresses. You've got vendors that they've got somewhere else to sell. We've got, crossover. We've got how long they've been on the market, all of those, a complete value driver. And I sat down with this, went into the management session and said, look, before we kick off about your dev requests, could I just present this? And the room went silent. 20 people, room went silent. I thought, this is it. Just lost my biggest client in 3 months, happy days. And the CEO of this business said, look, would you mind if you gave us a few minutes? And I'm sitting there with my team thinking, I've really balls this one up. Simon's kind of with me going, yeah, well done, Gary. Yeah, great job. And then we get called back in and the guy says, right, we're not going to implement anything else. We're not making any changes. We're not doing it until we're using what we've already got. And it was a real lesson learned to me as a supplier, which is they don't know what they don't know. You've got to help educate them a little bit. And sometimes that's in pound notes and pence value. Sometimes it's efficiencies. But your point is absolutely spot on, David. They don't know what they don't know. You've got to help them. Are they adopting it? Do they know how to adopt it? Are they being trained? It's not easy. And I think as technologists, we have to remember that as well.
Totally agree.
There
Yeah.
is definitely an issue with in some circumstances how software is evaluated. The best tech, it does need a behavioral change, and ultimately, what's our ROI? Completed sales. The ROI on a piece of software is not, does the user enjoy this piece of software?
Yeah.
I mean, in some circumstances, that might be the right question to ask. But actually, if you're getting a return on a piece of software, but someone's role has had to change in order to get you those sales faster, more certain for your consumers, that may be not the right place to look at it. And I think in really well-run businesses, you don't get that disconnect because the owners are looking at what the ROI is. I think maybe where you've got a more organic style of management, maybe it is that, do you like it? It's got to be about the numbers. Does it make you money? Does it make the completion more certain? Does it make it faster? Does it reduce the number of fall throughs?
It's a fascinating discussion because I think reducing fall throughs and getting that the word pipeline is something that I've never heard used so much as I've heard it used in the last sort of couple of years. And it's, those are the pain points where it's hurting agents in their pocket, but it's also hurting, I think let's be honest, the consumer themselves also are losing out. So if they're chasing a house, if we tend not to move house on a whim. I think that is key. It can be a painful process for some people. It's an upheaval. It's usually at key points in their life's journey. So they've got a new job, they're relocating, they've had a kid and they need more space. Kids have moved out and they need less space. You've got all of these things. Your health gets worse. You need to live on one level. There are all sorts of reasons why we move home. And we have to make these sort of changes. Every time a transaction falls through, it is not just an agent or a couple of agents that are losing out or a solicitor. It's also members of the public who are just trying to get on with their lives. And that causes untold disruption and cost. So I think there's a duty here for all of us to get our heads together as both agents and suppliers, have these kind of open discussions. I think they're really healthy. And we talk a lot more than we used to. There are lots of podcasts and there are lots of webinars. You can open your laptop at any point and find lots of talking heads about property. But I think actual conversations where we're sharing our experiences and almost enabling each other to make progress and to feed into that debate, I think is essential. I think this is how we get better. On that note, I would like to offer you all an opportunity. It's the magic wand moment. I'll come to each of you. If I could sort of give you that magic wand and say magically upgrade an estate agent's tech stack or put something in place that is going to radically change their lives, what would it be? Where would you start? I'll start with Paul.
I would give every agent a real-time chain dashboard embedded in their workflow, the one that they already use. And I'd give visibility to their clients as well. Not just visibility, nudges, alerts, kind of clear next steps. And that would cut days, weeks of completion and take pressure off the phones.
That's I'm going to take that one. We'll all say yes to that. Katy.
So I would give every agent the ability to pre-qualify the likelihood of a listing actually going through to completion, and feed that into their workflow right at the very beginning from first inquiry, and then they can use that to inform their pricing mechanisms, whether or not they want to list the property, and how they deal with the vendor and the marketing. So yeah, that's what I would do. And that might be a exclusive announcement of something coming soon.
Oh, right. Well, that's very interesting because I think something that you guys have always done well is and it's a word that wasn't really in our vernacular and our vocabulary as an industry previously, but propensity to sell is something that so this word propensity, you've got the propensity to sell. You already talk about the propensity to actually complete
Yes.
as well. So propensity to sell is whether or not people are thinking of selling
Yeah.
coming to the market. Propensity to complete is, is this a product that will sell? Is this a
Yes.
price point that will sell? Is there a market for it locally? Because you have to understand the nuances of your market in order to get to that. So yeah, wholeheartedly. So now I wait with bated breath to find out what you're bringing out. But I think anything that we can get in that respect, I think is really valid. Ricardo.
I'm gonna plead the fifth on recommending any particular tools, because there's a bunch of exciting things out there. I think we've hit some interesting points though today, particularly around interoperability. So my perspective on this, and there's a responsibility on us as CRM providers, not just Alto, but the others as well. I don't think it's about more tools. I think it's about orchestration of those tools. Ultimately, we've all touched on it. Agents want the right tool at the right moment. And so I think there's an evolution job of what an app store in a CRM looks like. I think we need to evolve from just a crowded app list into more native prompt based. At this point in your journey, here is a useful tool that you can use, and AI and automation will be absolutely key to getting that right. So that's and there's a little bit of an insight into where we're headed as well in that.
Well, I'm just going to offer you a compliment as well at the same time, because I just want to say that something that not only your company, but also the kind of CRM cohort as an entire group of people are getting much better at is listening to their customers and really sort of adapting to the feedback that you get. There used to be a time where you would give feedback to CRM and they'd say, well, sorry, but that's the way it's built and that's what it does. And we'll talk to the development department about it, but you knew that was them kicking it into the long, long grass, and you'd never see it again. But I see massive, huge
Great.
improvements in that, huge improvements in actively playing well with others, learning that integrations are not a threat; they're actually the key to getting better usage of your tools, but certainly keeping the clients happy because they get to use everything all in one place as we spoke. So
Great.
that's by the by and on the way. Gary, other than a stable internet connection, what would you like to see?
Yeah, you wouldn't believe I'm in London, would you?
No.
Look, I think there's two things, and I'm going to just operate in two different ways. First of all, I think there needs to be the industry coming together. There'll be few of us who've been here long enough to know, we can use the word hip. If it looks like a hip, it smells like a hip, it's still in legislation. We talk about contract ready packs. We've had a lot of conversation about that today. I won't dwell on it, but you could see some legislation, maybe an adoption of that I think it doesn't necessarily, which would encourage more technology into that space, not less. And I think that would make a real big difference. But I'm going to echo a little bit of what Ricardo said. We are literally scratching the surface for what AI and automation can deliver. I'm spending probably a biggest chunk of my time on looking at this because it won't replace agents. It never will. Anybody who says it will is a nutter, because it's a personal business. But what we can do is we can automate a hell of a lot more around what agents do, which just doesn't add any value. We've identified 152 different processes that agents do every single day, that actually just take them time and effort when they can be done better, more timely, more efficiently, in multiple communication methods through automation and AI, which is why I kind of use the word automation first. I think that's going to be the single biggest thing that you're going to see in the industry over the next 2 or 3 years. I mean, I've been blown away by what you can do with the kind of AI now, and I'm becoming a coder again because I can do everything. I tell it what I want it to do, and all of a sudden it produces what I actually want. I mean, I get 80%, and I think that's what we're going to see more and more in the industry.
You know what we never discuss on any webinars because it's a dirty word. We don't discuss cost. But is it true to say that with this kind of sophisticated tech that we are now seeing, the other thing is that cost in general doesn't need to be sky high. There are a lot of affordable products out there you can integrate. I think if I were starting out as an agent today and I were to make an essential list of things that I need, and then another list of things that I would like or I want, it doesn't need to cost the earth, does it? We're almost, the message really is we're in the golden age of tech, but it's also affordable tech, isn't it?
100%,
There's an
100%.
element that's true, but it's also about return.
Yeah.
I know it's that's the sales piece, but what would you be prepared to pay if you could halve your time to sell? What would you be prepared to pay if you could halve your fall through rate? And the kind of, I think, I don't want to, it's not my trial, but just looking at the LMS figures that have been discussed over the last week or so, that's a serious amount of money being left on the table. And looking at it from a return point of view rather than from a cost point of view, I think would be very beneficial sometimes.
I think that is very sound advice. And on that note, I'd like to thank all of you for feeding into this discussion today. Highly recommend that agents who are watching this and thinking about what they do next, reach out to each of our panelists. They are experts in their field. They are all delivering solutions that are helping agents achieve more and quicker. And not only achieve more but retain more, I think is the answer. We are not losing as much, both in terms of time, transaction time, and money ultimately as well. But everybody is very helpful and very willing to pitch in and get involved. So that is an open invitation to anybody watching this. There's lots of exciting stuff coming from each of the people that you see today. But for now, thank you very much.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Good to
Cheers,
see you all.
guys. Thanks so much. Cheers,
Bye-bye.
Ed.